I know you've been investigating the incident. You've been talking to a lot of customers. What can you tell us right now about what exactly happened and how much damage was done?
So to put it in context, as you know, Okta is the trusted identity provider for over 15,000 companies. So big, small, governments, private companies. And so anytime something like this happens, it's a big deal. And we'll talk about details and what happened, but I want to be really clear that we're responsible. So third parties this and third party that, it's our responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen. And the big takeaway, there are many takeaways from us, but the big takeaway is, as we've done before, we're going to learn from our mistakes, and we're going to be transparent about what we're doing differently in a concrete way, how we're going to prevent this from ever happening again.
So how did it happen?
So what happened was, as you mentioned, there's this third-party call center. And they do, inside this call center, there's about 40 people that are support agents that work on behalf of Okta to provide low-level support to our customers.
And this is Sitel, the third party,
correct,
right?
Yeah, and the hackers broke into this site. So they used some vulnerabilities and some, actually the competitor's software to break into this site. And when they were in the site, they were able to take screenshots of what these support agents were doing on their computers. And that's what they posted on Twitter a couple weeks ago.
So how many customers were actually compromised? You said initially as many as 366.
Yeah, and this is really important because through this whole process, we're trying to be as transparent and as conservative in our impact analysis as possible. So what we did is we looked at every possible customer that had any kind of support interaction over the 5 days in question. And that is the list of potentially impacted customers. Now, everyone is very concerned about this, and as they should be. Okta is critical infrastructure for 15,000 companies. So everyone assumed the worst, and we did as well, but the actual technical impact to companies in terms of what they need to do is near zero. Is near zero. But it's incumbent upon us.
What do you mean by that technical impact?
Actually what they need to do as a response to this, what disclosures they need to make.
So
or what actually they need to change. It's actually near zero.
366 companies, how many actually were compromised? Do you know yet?
Potentially impacted 366. So we're drawing that line very conservatively. But because of the nature of how our system worked and our product, the Okta security technology worked well in this case. And the way our processes really limit what a support agent can actually do on these systems, the impact is near zero.
So how many of those 366 customers do you believe were impacted?
It's not exactly clear because the hacker was essentially looking over the support agent's shoulders and looking at what was happening. So what we've done is we want to work with our customers to have a detailed analysis of what actually happened. So we've shared with all of these 366 companies detailed click-by-click support logs so we can work in conjunction with them to truly verify that the impact was zero. This investigation is open, and it won't be closed until we get every customer to agree with our assessment.
You faced a barrage of criticism, including from your own customers, about the timeline with which this was disclosed. Why did you wait almost 2 months to share this with the public?
Yeah.
And only after screenshots were shared by presumably Lapsus.
Yeah, I've talked to hundreds of customers, and this comes up over and over. And it's unacceptable, and we're accountable for it. The facts that, when I tell people the facts, they start to get a better understanding. The facts, while we knew something happened in this time period in January, what we actually knew was that an account takeover attempt actually failed, and we detected it, and it wasn't clear the impact. We didn't know the extent of the forensics report. It certainly didn't contain screenshots. So for all intents and purposes, the first time we knew about this, the severity of it, and what the hackers actually got was on March 22nd when they publicly leaked the information.
Now, your initial statement also stated that Okta itself was not breached. And this was in the middle of a lot of conflicting and confusing information, not just for your customers, but for the cyber community, for journalists like myself. How do you regain the trust of the enterprise community after this? And for customers, prospective customers who are saying, why should we use Okta?
Well, I think it's very important. We are a trusted brand, and that trust has been damaged. And we do take accountability for all the mistakes we've made. And we have made mistakes. And one of them, as you mentioned, is the communication was not as clear as it should have been. So we're trying to communicate more openly, more transparently, more consistently, and ultimately more clearly. And I think when customers in conversations like this understand the facts, how they unfolded and what we knew when, and more importantly, as we share how we're going to do better in the future to make sure this doesn't happen again, to make sure customer support environments aren't put in an insecure place, to make sure that the communication is more timely, to make sure that the communication is clear and there's no question about what was breached and wasn't breached. That's what we're committed to doing better next time.
What's your sense of how the business will be impacted by this? Have you lost customers as a result of this?
Well, it's very early, so our focus has been on talking to customers and talking to prospects. And when I have those conversations and people on the management team have those conversations, what's very clear is a lot of these same questions come up, which is why I'm so grateful for you allowing me to talk about this today. But when we address these concerns and we talk most importantly about how mistakes were made, we're taking responsibility, and how we have concrete plans to remediate this and make sure it doesn't happen again, they're in a much better place at the end of the conversation than when they started the conversation.
Now, Bloomberg has reported that the alleged mastermind of this group is a 16-year-old who lives with his mom in England. What do you make of the fact that a teenager may have pulled this off?
It's interesting, but ultimately, Emily, it doesn't matter, because we have to protect customers against everyone. Teenagers and adults and nation states and people that have various different motives. And it's incumbent upon us to make sure this never happens again. And that's including learning from all the mistakes made. And more importantly, collaborating with the broader cyber community to share open and transparent information about what happens. One of the biggest weaknesses in cyber response is people are afraid to share what happened. If you look time after time again, even this subcontractor to Okta, they were hesitant to share what they knew. Why? Because they're afraid of litigation. They're afraid of being sued, and they're afraid of reputational damage. If you look, this hinders our response as a community over and over again. And we have to get better at that. And we're trying to lead the way. We're trying to be a leader, be open and transparent. And if you look back at the facts we've disclosed, they're all consistent. We haven't had to change anything. And so we're proud of this front-footedness and this transparency despite the mistakes we've made.
Are you worried about, or are you facing any, or bracing for potential regulatory scrutiny as a result of A, what happened, or B, the timeline with which you disclosed it?
Well, I'm very confident with the facts and how we've behaved in light of those facts. But I think the bigger question is, should there be more regulation to somehow try to get this logjam broken of people disclosing things? So I know the SEC is working on things, the federal government is working on things, and we would welcome that, because we think the best thing to happen is to be there more openness and more transparency in these kind of matters.
Have you been talking to law enforcement about the incident itself? Authorities in the UK?
This is an ongoing investigation, and we have been working with law enforcement, and I think they're doing a good job in this case.
So what will you be doing differently going forward?
Well, like I said, there's many learnings, and we're committed to not only taking those learnings, doing a deep analysis, and proactively putting things in place to make sure that these problems never happen again. We're going to publish this report to our customers, and they can collaborate and have input into this retrospective. So the first thing is just to make sure that no customer support information is ever placed in an insecure environment. Now, ironically here, the problem with this site is while they used Okta to log into these support systems, they didn't use Okta to protect their own front door as a company. And it was a competitor product. And the competitor product was at fault for this breach. And we're going to make sure that these companies that are third parties to us use Okta, among many other things, to ensure that their technical controls are up to the snuff that we should require.
So this is Sitel. Do you no longer work with Sitel?
We no longer work with Sitel.
And what's the product that they were using?
You have to ask them.
Look, the Biden administration has warned of a heightened threat of cyber attacks in the midst of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. It's my understanding this didn't have anything to do with that.
That's our understanding, it did not, yeah.
But how would you describe the environment in cyberspace right now? Is there chaos? Is there a greater risk of any kind of cyber attack happening, given the activity from Russia and Ukraine?
A couple things. First of all of our information shows that this was not, or indicates that this was not related. But like I said, we're very diligent, and we're checking every possible scenario, and we're most focused on protecting all of these kinds of things from ever happening. But everyone knows that the power of technology is so great, and with that power comes risk. So everyone has a general heightened awareness and a heightened investment to stop these kinds of things from happening. In addition to that, what's happening geopolitically has everyone on edge, which explains partially why people were so concerned and there's so much stress and strife. What ultimately has turned out to be something that's very, very minor technical impact.